Hi, Michael. Great to have you here. Thanks for doing this interview.
Right. Yeah. Happy to be here. Thank you.
So let's kick it off by hearing a bit about you and your background within the self-funded employer domain.
So I've spent 30 years in health and benefits, working predominantly with Fortune 500 employers. I've done it on the insurance side. So I've worked in the large carrier space, worked with the Blues and United Healthcare. I've also worked in earlier stage companies in the well-being space and disease management, as well as some of the earlier companies around advocacy and navigation. And so all of those experiences kind of brought me into the consulting world that I've been in for the last 10 years. And again, my focus in consulting has been working with large employers on their benefit strategy and helping to design programs that really are focused on reducing cost and improving the administration and really improving the overall employee experience.
I'm excited to speak to you, given both that experience in the vendor side as well as on the consultant side. And right now you work for Lockton. Can you tell me a bit about the company and more specifically how you interact within the self-insured employers and digital health solution domain?
So Lockton is the largest privately owned insurance brokerage and consulting firm. So we have risk management consulting, and we also have health and benefits consulting services within the organization, and we are global. Our services are, working in the health and wellness space, in particular, working with clients on their benefit strategy. The thing that's really evolved, I think, for consulting is our clients, typically the CHRO or the head of health total rewards. Those folks have been tasked to do a lot more with a lot less over the last number of years. And that means that our teams have to do more with less as well. So we've really had to, focus in on where the value is in the programs and really help them to design new strategies and solutions to get after the cost equation.
And that's so important. We'll touch upon that later on how vendors can help CHROs do more with less. This is such an important part of the value prop, in this market. At a high level, to remind the audience and ourselves, part of the intention of this interview is to create a companion resource to go with the self-insured employer validation cheat sheet. Now, ideally, you'll have that next to you as you watch this video, as it might make it easier to follow along. But if you don't have it already, go to lionbird.com/SIE-sheet to download it. And let's dive right in. So to begin, we've been seeing a move of more employers away from fully funded insurance toward self-funding, and this has really been accelerating. And it's not only happening among larger employers, but also now among mid-sized employers, specifically via what's called level funded plans. Can you share with us some of the reasons you think this move to self-funding is accelerating, and what is the role that consultants such as Lockton are playing in this market?
Typically, our consultants would advise any employer with more than 300 or 500 employees to consider self-funding. And that's where you start to get into the conversation around level funding versus full self-funding. And really the advantages to full self-funding are some 5 to 7% savings that you could generate just through premium tax reduction, decreased margin, and increased flexibility from a plan design perspective. Also, once you start to get into that, say, 500 to 5,000 life segment for employers, they're typically covering their risk with stop loss anyway. So you have, the vast majority of those self-funded have some kind of stop loss threshold that would be limiting, their total exposure to large claims. And that's really where the bulk of the cost come in. It's in that 3 to 5% of the population that are driving 60, 70, sometimes 80% of the cost.
And related to that, you mentioned the term level funded plans and mid-sized employers, and some viewers may not be familiar with the different flavors of self-funding or the different segments in this market. So maybe you can briefly discuss from the point of view of a digital health vendor or startup, what should they know about the importance of segmentation in this market?
It is important. A lot of the solutions come to market and they typically target employers with over 1,000 lives. And in most cases, those employers are going to be fully self-funded. That level funding is still closer to a fully insured model. It just provides some ability to share in good experience in good years. So essentially like providing a dividend at the end of the year. But a true fully insured program limits the employer's flexibility and puts the risk back on the carrier. So when you think about who's investing in programs that are going to manage cost, if it's fully insured, the health plan is going to make those investments and they're going to invest in things that they know are going to drive savings. Versus on the self-funded employer side, they are fully at risk and therefore they need to make their own decisions about what's going to drive value within their program.
Very clear and very important for those who read online that there's a move of the mid-market to self-funded, but they need to understand who is ultimately responsible for that plan design. So that's very valuable. Now getting into the cheat sheet itself, question one is really about teasing out some of the reasons benefit managers might choose to purchase you, or that health insurance consultants may choose to promote and recommend you. And as you're leading the Insights and Innovation Lab at Lockton, and given your past role at Willis Towers, you have a great vantage point into this, so would like to spend some time on it. So to start out, what exactly is the Insights and Innovation Lab? And in particular, it would be very relevant, I think, for digital health startups to understand the detailed steps your team takes to identify client needs and then to evaluate and select the most fitting vendors to recommend.
Yeah, that's great. So you mentioned I've been in the industry for a long time, worked at Willis Towers Watson, similar role in innovation. And I would say most consulting firms have some version of an Insights and Innovation Lab. I had a unique opportunity to start this one here at Lockton and really built it around three principles. One is just equipping our teams with market insights. So our team does the research to help understand what are the leading trends and what's really adding value for our clients. And so we build a lot of intellectual capital related to that and helping them have a conversation around strategy. The second area is really what you described and what I would call solution validation. So we spend a lot of time in the market, meeting with venture capital, meeting with the portfolio companies themselves to truly understand the target area, the focus, the potential to drive value for an employer for that solution. What we've seen over the years, obviously, is we've gone from broad population-based programs to very narrow point solutions. And I think we're starting to see an evolution back towards aggregating some of those solutions in a more holistic, person-centric way. So our team is really focused on understanding level one, is this company ready for the employer space? So we consider, business viability the first question. What's the funding? What's the management team look like? What's the, momentum in the space that they're in? And do they have good, credible evidence of the solution value? So a lot of times the early stage company is looking at a study that's been published and applying the results of that study to their area of interest. And that's okay if we think that the research is credible enough and it's specific enough to what they're trying to solve. But we always have to start with that, like what's the end point? What are we solving for? And then, then we look through further evidence of value. So a lot of times digital health companies will come in and claim a lot of savings and value. And we really have to narrow in on the direct areas of impact. Is this going to impact claims, or is it going to impact employee experience or benefits administration? In terms of benefit simplification. I think those are all sort of relevant categories, so we can look more broadly than just ROI conversation. And I think we'll get into ROI versus VOI a little bit later. That is an important part of it. I think the final piece is the ability to then measure progress over time and having a broad set of metrics that we can align in the outfront and say, this is what we hope to achieve. And if we see progress against these types of metrics, then we're able to better understand the value that's being delivered.
And as a vendor looking to enter this market, how should one think about when is the best time to start talking to benefit consulting groups such as yourselves versus just approaching the self-insured employers directly? Is it worthwhile to get on the radar early, or should we really save this for the scale-up phase when you're more ready to answer some of those questions around business viability and evidence of solution value?
I think it's perfectly appropriate to do both, right? I think that there are some employers who are very leading edge and are willing to engage in pilot kind of conversations, and they want to be first. I think that you'll benefit a lot more by meeting with the consultants because they represent 25 or 50 clients, and they have knowledge of what's going on specifically and can really help you narrow your focus around to who are those innovators. So it's definitely an efficiency play to get insights from consultant firms. The one thing I would caution about is some of the consulting firms have moved to sort of a pay-to-play model. That's not something that I felt was valuable at Lockton, but others have sort of set up structures where in order to get in and get attention within the consulting house, there's different levels and structures of sort of sponsorships to do that. I think we want to stay independent of that and provide an independent analysis. And it's important to just understand really what that access affords you, if you're going to go down that path.
Sure. This is an interesting subject. I mean, if you go to kind of the back end administration of these plans, you see PBMs, you see stop loss, you see TPAs, and this has existed for some time, this pay to play infrastructure. And I'm curious, it sounds like Lockton does not participate in it, but would you say that digital health vendors should be prepared for those types of conversations of how to kind of compensate the consultants directly, or is this kind of less common? It's more of a broker sort of conversation?
I think there's really two things to consider. One is just in a pure commission type model, right? Where brokers and consultants are accustomed to structuring their fees with a client based on various revenue streams from the vendors. And so that's perfectly appropriate as long as it's fully disclosed. And so when you think about the work that the consultant has to do to help integrate your solution with everything else that's going on in the employer, I think that there's a reasonable basis for saying, hey, that's causing that consultant and that employer to do extra work, whether it's communication strategies or systems integrations strategies, things that take time and effort to plan and launch. And so often those can be implementation fees, or they could be ongoing commission streams. The other side of it, I think, is when you talk about the role of aggregators, so health plans, PBMs, they're also providing a valued service, which is really data integration. And so there's some consideration there into you're getting a fishing license essentially to go into the aggregation pool. And now, your solution has to be optimized to find and really target the right individuals. And I think if it's structured well, you can really, align your incentives around growing the engagement.
And beyond compensation, as one is thinking about best practices for activating a relationship with a benefits consultancy, I mean, these are pretty large groups with significant frontline staff as well as the HQ and the subject matter experts. And your experience, both as a vendor and at these groups, what does a startup need to know in terms of resource and time requirements to ensure that they make this channel successful? And it's always interesting to know what are some of the more common failure modes of such partnerships to be aware of.
A couple of things to kind of call out. One is target the right consultants within the firm. So within every consulting firm, you're going to have specialists. And so depending on what your solution is targeting, you want to find and speak to the right individuals. Often you see this shotgun approach where the digital health vendor is just talking to everybody, and that just creates a lot of noise, and it doesn't ultimately get to the people who can both help you to refine your pitch to the employer And, really the people that the rest of the consulting firm will look to for an opinion. So there really is value for you and efficiency in targeting the right people within the consulting firm based on the condition area or the focus area of the solution. So I think that's really important from an efficiency standpoint. The other thing is when you do your pitch, I think you need to recognize that you are talking to people who understand the problem probably as well as you and probably understand the employer's problem better than you. And so that's an opportunity to learn and to understand everything else that's going on in the employer's ecosystem, and before you start talking about how your solution fits into that. I think too often early stage companies come in and they got the solution and it's going to solve everything, but they really haven't considered what the employer's problem is and what they're really trying to solve.
So come with big ears, as they say, and be ready to actually listen, not just talk. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And among the large health benefits consultancies, Lockton has, as I understand it, a relatively unique organizational structure where they're what's called producers that own their big book of business and are a bit more independent versus what you'd see in other groups in this space. And so within that context, maybe you could share, how a subject matter expert group like yours works in disseminating knowledge and supporting those frontline producers versus, for example, at other groups like Willis Towers, where you previously spent some time.
There's a ton of value to the producer model, and as you described, that they're really focused on identifying the needs within their clients and the target segment that they may work within. So they really do become experts, let's say, within an industry or within a type of employer. And that's how they kind of build and grow their network. So based on that, they're the subject matter expert for everything to know about the client. What we try to do from an innovation lab perspective is help them with the broad strategy, why this program is important, what areas that it would target, what is the potential value to an employer. And then, we develop the guidebook or the toolkit that kind of helps them walk through that. But it's really the marrying up of that knowledge with the industry specific knowledge that makes it most valuable to the client. And so that's kind of the section we call solution fit, right? It's going from the generalized, hey, this solution will drive value in these areas, to the opportunity analysis, which is data driven about my client, my industry, my geography, the age, sex, demographics of this population. How do we know that this solution is actually going to be successful in that environment?
As trusted advisors to their clients, it sounds like they would value your assistance and helping them kind of further strengthen that position. That makes sense.
Absolutely.
And moving away from Lockton, going back to the subject of vendor value proposition, while most people with any background in business are familiar with the concept of ROI, return on investment, in this segment, you also hear about VOI. What can you tell us about what VOI is, how it's calculated, and also how it's perceived and its importance?
I think employers are always focused on cost, right? That it's attraction and retention and cost, and those are the number 1 and 2 variables. So when you think about attraction and retention, those are your VOI factors. And then when you think about cost reduction, those are your ROI factors, right? So what goes into attraction, retention, and VOI, those are the things that drive employee experience. So does my employee appreciate that I'm offering this type of benefit, even if it's not of benefit to me? It could be that, we're being more diverse and offering diverse type benefits. And so I feel better about my organization because of their social responsibility and, their willingness to represent that through the types of diverse benefits that they offer. That's an example. VOI can include, other types of value drivers so what I kind of think about it like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? You have sort of your basic functional needs, which are, help to simplify, help me navigate, help connect me to resources more quickly. If that saves me time, it saves me money. And those are some basic like satisfiers from an employee, net promoter score sort of perspective. I think you go to the next level of employee needs, and it's around things of, that support well-being. So, does this solution, help me to live a better lifestyle, live a healthier lifestyle? Do I feel good about myself? And then you can kind of get to higher order needs that are around self-actualization. Like, is this really contributing to affinity and belongingness to the organization? So those are sort of like broad topics, but as you go into those elements of value, those are the elements that really drive loyalty within an organization as well. And, they can be measured within a point solution by looking at things like NPS, but also looking at engagement metrics. Like, are people engaging with the product on a consistent basis, and are they staying for long periods of time, which is also a measure of value. There are other, metrics around engagement that we try to look at in terms of, whether or not they're, engaging digitally versus engaging, with a person or a coach, and how do we assess those kind of modalities differently. But ultimately, it comes down to how big of a population and how much of the right people are engaging in the solution.
And so that ties back to the relationship with those frontline consultants that probably allow you to identify where the employer is in that hierarchy of needs, if they're even ready for, some of those higher order effects, or if they're still kind of putting those baseline things in place. And
that's absolutely right. You got it. That's going back to that pyramid. You got to get the functional needs right first.
People don't know how to find or utilize benefits. You're probably not going to, see some of that more attraction retention stuff. And the natural next question, you touched upon it somewhat, but happy to dive in further if there's more. While measurement of medical ROI is standardized and it's supported via claims and RX data, how do companies usually go about measuring effects on softer costs, for example, such as disability, absenteeism, attraction, retention, DE&I? Is this also convincing when you don't have hard data to support it?
It's important to bring data in every conversation, no doubt. So if you do have, a financial ROI proposition, understand that the consultants are going to want to, go deep on your methodology and where those cost savings are. It is still very difficult for any point solution or digital health solution to truly show that their particular point solution is driving overall trend reduction or cost savings, because there's so much else going on in the employer's environment. And we're really talking in some cases about proving that an event didn't happen, right? As a result of this intervention, we didn't have 5 heart attacks last year, right? Like, so that is always the struggle with true ROI. And that's why we need to have a VOI story. So I think VOI, talking about things you mentioned like decreased disability, some of those numbers can be measured. You can start to combine disability statistics with medical statistics and show, how that may change over time as a result of an intervention. Other softer savings in that VOI category around productivity and absenteeism, it's going to be something that's of interest, but it's not going to move the needle. So I wouldn't hang your ROI number to improvements in, some of these softer savings categories. So that one's harder to quantify. I think you should talk about it. I think employers are, for example, buying solutions that increase access and affordability without having a direct impact on ROI. Those kind of metrics do play a role in helping to establish the credibility for the solution.
Makes a lot of sense. And related to this topic of vendor validation is also business model. And of course, from the early days of digital health, it was all about PMPM fees per member per month, simpler to budget for, but does not really hold vendors to account performance or actual utilization numbers. And also, back in those earlier days, every vendor, it would seem, had very inflated marketing claims of incredible ROI and VOI, but very little evidence oftentimes to back it up. And so from your vantage point now, of course, as a consultant advising your staff as well as employers, would be interested to know, what should vendors know in terms of what is expected in terms of clinical and financial validation of their outcomes? And related to that, how common are performance guarantees now, and how are they usually structured contractually?
Great topic. A couple of things. One, it's all about alignment with who's holding the risk. So going back to that conversation around the self-funded employer owns the risk for this. So when it comes to the cost of your program, you need to think about ways that you can align with that, whether it's a risk-sharing arrangement or other ways that you're willing to go at risk for the performance of your program. And so I think performance guarantees can be best structured when you have a really good understanding of how to measure that type of value and to be able to show that you have faith and confidence in your solution and that it will actually generate those types of returns. And you're willing to put administrative fees or other types of fees at risk associated with that. The problem, as we've been talking about with ROI, is if I stacked up every point solution's ROI, healthcare would be free, right? So I can't really trust that every 2-to-1 ROI out there is actually generating those types of returns. And back to the VOI conversation, if it's cost neutral, it really just has to be better than the standard of care in the market, right? So even if the costs are somewhat the same, we should look at the solution relative to what I could get in the community, right? And is this a better experience? Is it back to the simplification, minimizing risk and following evidence-based practices where we know even in the community, evidence-based practice isn't always used consistently, even by physicians. So having care protocols and things that are really aligned with that is important. But back to your question on alignment of value, PEPMs just don't work for an employer because they don't align those incentives. Ideally, many of the digital health solutions and virtual care solutions have moved towards a network model where you're essentially billing fee for service. But remember, fee for service doesn't really work either. So there's some measure in between that is really value-based, right? It's some assumptions around how much we're going to pay for this service relative to the cost of care in the community and your ability to create a better experience for the member with some kind of cap or fee structure that says I'm going to go at risk if this expense does not reduce these expenses over here, right? Like that's how we have to think about it.
Yeah, so not a fit for every vendor program, but for those who can support it, performance guarantees can really help you stand out.
And sometimes performance guarantees are just around like service levels, right? So if your solution is really focused on administrative simplification, then it needs to be a flawless experience and you need to stand behind that.
So not always total cost of care with challenging attribution models, and
that's just the
sometimes you
fun
can start
stuff
simpler.
that we get to talk about. Yeah.
Exactly. In reality, sometimes they're simpler than that.
Yeah.
Now, even if you bring amazing, well-validated clinical and financial results, as well as an aligned business model, you still won't be successful if you don't pair that with a detailed understanding of barriers to adoption, such as contracting, integration, implementation requirements, which we outline in the cheat sheet. So when we look at this from the payer point of view, looking beyond just the cost of programs, why might self-insured employers or consultants be hesitant to bring on additional digital health vendors?
When you think about the complexity we started with for a CHRO of a small business, they're often wearing a ton of hats and they may not have the staff. Typically that 500 to 5,000 life employer has a very small benefits staff. And so the administrative complexity for them simply to review the number of contracts, the technical review of security, info security, and all of those levels means going through their legal department to get these things approved. And in a small organization, that can be a real challenge, which is why many of those have moved towards the easy button, which is, is this available through my health plan? Can I contract with it separately, or has somebody simplified the contracting process? In larger organizations, they do have more resources. But what's happened, as we talked about, is we've stacked so many different point solutions in the ecosystem, and now the member experience is fragmented. So if I have a solution that is focused on diabetes over here and behavioral health over here, and they're not talking to each other, they're not self and cross-referring, then I have a really disjointed member experience. And then the broader question is the data. Can I actually combine data from all of those different point solutions to get real insights about the population and understand the need, at that individual level, and make sure that I'm best supporting them? So those are just some examples of the complexity that go into an employer's decision making.
These points on how to package yourself and make it easy to purchase your solution are so critical, and in some ways just as important as the solution itself.
Absolutely.
And given the importance of making it easy to work with you, as a digital health vendor seeking to sell into this domain, how might you think about the role and importance of other vendors, such as the third-party administrators, whether they're independent TPAs or ASOs that are owned by health plans, or even other vendor partners like Accolade, where you used to work, or other navigators or skilled digital health companies? What might you think about asking of them or getting from them as you think about the go-to-market motion?
That is where I do see the biggest shift in the market, moving towards these aggregation platforms and working more with health plans. I think there's a lot of value to a digital health vendor that wants to pursue those channels, because they can simplify sort of the access to the employer. They don't have to have a huge sales team going out and inundating the market. As we talked about, that can be frustrating and challenging. But the integration points there are typically around data sharing. So your willingness to share engagement data in your solution and be open and transparent about the interactions that people are having, and getting to a common definition of engagement. So does that mean you sent them literature? Did they talk or engage with a human? Did they actually, participate in your digital solution on a consistent basis? Like, what are all those metrics that lead to a true definition of engagement? And being open and willing to share that, because that creates more insights for the aggregator in the middle who is trying to serve the member, right? So if you think of a role of the navigation service, they're really playing the role of an expert. And when I worked at Accolade, we used to say you'd never go into the legal system without an attorney. And I think it's the same with healthcare, right? You shouldn't really try to navigate healthcare on your own. And there is value to, whether it's the health plan or the navigation service who plays that expert, and they can better interpret the kind of data that you can provide and then help the individual make a decision about what's right for them.
I imagine standardizing reporting and data is a service in itself for many groups.
That could be a whole separate conversation.
Yeah.
How do you make that part simple and easy? And then that relates back to how do I prove the value to the employer? Because the employer wants to see how all of these solutions are working in totality. I think the founder is often very, obsessed with their particular area, but they need to recognize the broader set of programs and resources that are available, and how the employer just needs to look across all of those investments and say, is it really, creating the value we need for this organization?
And in the cheat sheet, we shared a list of some of the bigger aggregator partners, which hopefully will make finding them a bit easier. Related to solution adoption, one of the less appreciated issues when selling to self-insured employers tends to be plan design. Now, for those who haven't been exposed to this and how it impacts contracting and utilization of new vendors, specifically those vendors bringing alternative provider networks, as it's called, can you explain the significance of plan design documents for digital health vendors, and specifically how different plan design features may contribute to shaping the strategy for a self-insured employer?
So the vast majority of employers, self-funded employers in particular, have some form of an account-based health plan these days. And that may be a partial offering or a full offering. So I think it's in the account-based offerings, which are really health reimbursement accounts or health savings accounts. There's those two different types. But we won't differentiate just for sake of the conversation. I think that's where digital health vendors often try to customize or provide some flexibility in designing their benefit. So it may be that there are rewards for choosing higher value solutions and the ability for the employer to put a credit back into the account, may be one way to influence engagement, right? If the employer wants to see that. Another thing that's arisen in the last couple of years are these lifestyle spending accounts. These are after-tax accounts, but they also provide some ability for the employer to steer dollars towards whatever the employee wants, for their health and well-being journey. And that is another avenue, I think, for digital health solutions to really look to and say, this might be a wellness type program. And, is it better served by aligning with a lifestyle spending account where, we're really targeting a specific niche within the employer base, and within the employees, they can choose their own journey through a lifestyle spending account and make those kind of purchases easier for them because the employer is allocating dollars. So, when it comes to the traditional plan designs, there's network-based solutions and centers of excellence-based solutions as well. And that's where, if you're really going to change an employer's plan design, because that's a once-a-year kind of decision, and it doesn't go lightly without a lot of work to integrate back with the health plan, who has to either change a deductible or create a separate coding structure for how your benefit fits into plan design.
So it sounds like to get your foot in the door, you likely don't want to touch plan design in order to avoid, having to build yourself into open enrollment. But maybe over time, there would be some advantage towards having set budgets that reward utilization of certain of your program. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think through those account-based programs, you can really provide some customization, but recognize that may take longer. And the initial, if you want to go off cycle, as we call it, and be available any time of the year, that's going to limit, what types of incentives or plan designs you could influence.
And so from your experience, for those who do want to go all the way and bake themselves into plan designs and fully benefit from syncing with it, what can they do to be more proactive in doing so? And, is this something you've seen done successfully? Is it a must-have, or is it more optional in this market today?
I think it's still optional. I don't see it as a must-have, other than the primary goal right now is to steer towards higher quality, lower cost type solutions. And so that tends to be the center of excellence conversation, where you're steering to a facility or to a bundled payment solution. Other than that, there's probably some advantages to things like being part of a preventive care benefit where it can be paid first dollar versus having to go through the deductible first. So you have to be mindful of those tax advantages that create some complexity. If you want your benefit to be paid first dollar, you may not be able to do that in an HSA. So it's more, at a really detailed level that you have to understand the tax code and those implications.
We covered a lot of ground today. I'm sure there's plenty more, but we'll save that for future conversations. And to wrap things up on a high note, stepping away from all this complexity and tactics, maybe you can give us your take on why should founders and investors in the digital health arena be paying close attention to self-insured employers as a budget holder for innovation in healthcare?
I think half of all lives in the US are in some kind of private health plan. So 165 million people are there as a addressable market. I think that's the first reason to really care about it. I do think, there's a lot that's being done in the government sector that can also transfer over into the employer market. So solutions that may work for other risk takers like government solutions, Medicare, Medicaid, often those, have applicability, but the makeup, the risk of the Medicare population looks different than an employer pool. So when you're really designing a solution specific to employers, you have to think about how that solution solves a particular issue of the workforce, right? The risk pool is different. The types of the highest cost claimants, are coming from cancer and musculoskeletal conditions, and you have to think about it from the employer's lens. But I think that there's still huge potential because we continue to see, 6 to 8% growth in those healthcare costs every year, and employers are hungry for solutions that are going to help get after that number, help to mitigate that trend, deflect that trend over time. I also think it's something I said earlier, the lack of evidence-based practice in the community is an opportunity, right? If you really think about the ability to structure care flows that are evidence-based, and you can offer a digital health solution that is actually better than a community health provider, and you can show quality, then you have a great path to showing value to the employer and why everyone is going to want that preferred experience that's more convenient. If I can do it digitally or virtually instead of having to wait in a doctor's office, that's just not a great experience. And so there's so many those elements of value that I think digital health can bring to an employer solution beyond just the financial value.
So despite the existence of many vendors and a complex ecosystem, costs continue to accelerate, and there seems to be plenty of opportunity to further make a dent in this market. It's still early innings, it sounds like.
I think so. I wish it was better. I wish I could say that after 30 years we've solved it, but I know that we keep moving the goalposts too. So, there's so much new technology that is driving this. That is what's creating opportunity.
Well, it makes it exciting to be operating in this space. And
absolutely.
For those viewers who are seeing this and want to continue the conversation, how can they best go about getting in contact with you?
I'm happy to talk with anyone. So you can reach me at my email and Perlmutter@Lockton.com. I'm sure you can share that afterwards too, but that's really the best way. And through the Insights and Innovation Lab, we're always interested in meeting with new vendors, new solutions to understand your value proposition and help us, rethink how employers should be solving these big, complex problems. So we love to engage in those conversations and would welcome the opportunity.
Thank you, Michael. Great talking to you today.
All right. Thank you.